Hello and welcome to Trusty Chords, the podcast which aims to celebrate music and those that create it. Ahead of making this podcast, I really had to think back to where I first discovered the band Metric. Hailing from Toronto in Canada, the group came together back in 1998, initially forming as a duo between Emily Haines and Jimmy Shaw, before things expanded, evolved, and early releases started arriving. There's an interesting story about how their first records actually came about, stay tuned for that one, but personally I think I would have come on board with Metric around the time of their fourth album, Fantasies, in 2009. That's where a lot of folks came on board, to be quite honest, and I'm not too ashamed to say I was definitely among the many who were drawn to the band's immersive sound and their rising popularity. Since then, they've been a constant figure in the new releases list, with this past April resulting in the release of their 10th album, Romanticize The Dive. It's an album you should definitely check out if you're a fan of their earlier material, and it's one that you'll likely find yourself returning to quite a few times. This week, I was lucky enough to have a chat with Emily and Jimmy about the band's history, their new record, and how it's all up to me whether they make it back to Australia or not. No pressure. Incidentally, as we spoke, they were gearing up to return to one of the most Canadian tour lineups imaginable, with Broken Social Scene and Stars as their tour mates. Sure, Emily is a former member and Jimmy is listed as a current member of Broken Social Scene, so it's not that out of the ordinary, but what a bill that is. Anyway, have a listen to Metric's Romanticize The Dive, have a listen to our chat, and I'll see you at the end of the episode for some general housekeeping. Emily and Jimmy from Metric, thank you very much for joining this episode of the Trusty Chords podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, hell yeah.
So for those who might not recogniise your names, could you give me a quick few words to introduce yourselves? And I guess tell me why we're chatting today, if that's not too much of a heavy existential question.
Well, Jimmy can say who we are, but I can say why we're chatting today, which is we haven't been back to Australia in way too long. And we're hoping that by talking to you, we're getting one step closer to coming back to see you guys.
Beautiful. That I like that little bit of manifestation you've got in your in the tone of voice there.
I'm working on it, Tyler.
And plus that also knocks off one of my questions at the end. But I guess what I usually love to do at the start of these podcasts is actually go back in time to where a love of music first formed. But because I'm chatting to a couple of you, I'm actually going to go back in time to where the Metric story first begins. So I guess, for the both of you, how do you go from, being lovers of music to coming together and forming the band that we know and love today?
I'll jump in on that one. It was weirdly, it's like, and I think this just sort of dawned on us in the last couple of days that Emily and I met about 30 years ago this week, which is crazy. And funny enough, it wasn't necessarily based out of like the love of music, but we were at this venue. We got brought by a common friend to go see a band, and it was sort of through the common distaste of the band that was playing that we started talking and struck up a conversation and started talking about what we would do that would be so much better than what was happening in front of us. So that's kind of like the origin story, and it all just kind of grew from there.
Right. So I always really like it when those sort of stories are based around this general sort of, watching a band and sort of being like, if we were up there doing this, we would be doing it so much better. Like, I guess,
Yeah.
Was there any sort of particular vision for what you wanted this little musical project to sound like? Because obviously you both come from sort of rich musical backgrounds. So I could assume that there's a lot of influences at play when you actually decide to make music together.
I think there was a lot of it was about the ethos as much as the sound. And it's kind of crazy to imagine. But at the time when we met, it was this like revolutionary idea that there would be like independent labels in Canada. There were certainly artists who had like tried to strike out and had done their thing and tried to like compete globally, but it's really hard because mostly the way it's structured is like you have outposts of major labels in Canada and you're kind of just like this colony. And usually you have these like mega artists, but there was all this great music other than what we weren't enjoying that night. But there was tons of incredible talent and musicianship, but it was just like untapped and had nowhere to go and no way to like ever be heard. And also surprising now that the world is so different, but like distribution was just impossible, right? It's like the days of people leaving like a CDR on the back of a toilet was like how you could hope somebody would hear your music, where now everyone can have their music heard. Whether they'll hear it or not is a separate question, but the infrastructure is there that you can be heard. But so we were like, how do we do something different? How do we like, make it outside of these two like completely not great options of either courting, being assigned to like in sort of satellites of these major labels that there was nothing on their rosters that we thought was cool, or just like disappearing into obscurity. So a lot of what we set out to do, and I think we did do, was like not only make the music we wanted to make, but make it on our own terms and own our own music, which it was hard. It took a long time, but 30 years later, we did it.
I mean, does it feel like it's been 30 years? Like that must feel a
Yeah.
little bit strange to look at it.
It feels a bit like 30 years.
Well, it's like I don't really know what 30 years feels like until
other
this,
than to measure it like this,
know?
Exactly.
Like this is the only form of measurement I got.
Yeah, of course. It's just when people like myself say, "Hey, 3 decades, how you feeling?" sort of thing.
Oh my God, I know, it's so weird, but and yet, music is timeless, fountain of youth.
Of course, that's the wonderful little takeaway quote to take away from this chat today. But just as you were sort of saying there, Emily, about how like back in the day, like obviously there was no the whole musical landscape looked totally different. So I guess then when you're sort of like starting off with this new musical project, like what sort of was the vision for the future? Because if you're sort of thinking, well, the only real way to really get heard is like mainstream labels or anything, I'm assuming then you guys aren't necessarily thinking world domination's on the schedule here. I'm probably assuming it's more just a case of getting together, having fun, and making some noise together.
Oh hell no, no, it was world domination.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. Well,
after
3 decades, you're on your way.
It was. I mean, especially between the two of us, it kind of was. Like when Emily and I first met, we were kind of like, okay, let's go out and world domination. By the time we'd kind of moved to New York and we were meeting Josh and Jules, weirdly at that point it was more like, okay, let's just start a rock band and have fun, because it was the early 2000s and we were sort of just surrounded by that energy in Brooklyn. It was like everyone was just in a band and having fun, and no one really had these grand visions at that point of like huge levels of success. And all of the people that were doing really cool things and being successful around us, the White Stripes and the Strokes and, all of that sort of echelon of bands weren't really doing it for any other reason than to like have the best possible time. So
it's so true. It's like we got a second chance. It's like we got out of here by having that attitude, but then we just went through so much rigmarole with like record labels and stuff that by the time we were back in New York in 2001, we were like, oh yeah, we met Josh and Jules and we're like, let's just play music. So we did get there eventually.
We did.
I was going to say, like, we obviously get the first album in 2003, which is the Old World Underground. But if I'm correct, is it true that Grow Up and Blow Away was supposed to be the debut album?
Yes, and it is. Well, yeah, it didn't come out first, but it was the first record that we made. And that was sort of the end of like, it was before we met Josh and Jules. And it was sort of at this time where if we got it signed to a label, the label got bought by another label, that record got shelved, the people who signed us got fired, and, sort of classic like late 90s record industry bullshit. And then, and we were kind of just like, we were exhausted at that point. Like there's whatever we thought we were trying to do, and the career that we were convinced we were about to have was not taking place in front of us. And that's when we just said, fuck it. We moved to Brooklyn. We met Josh and Jules. We started playing. We bought a van. We started touring. We started playing shows. We started not worrying about the path that we thought was the correct path. And then, we put out a record and another record. And then the guy who sort of started a label for us in Canada felt that it was really important to go back and buy that record from the label that got shut down and release the first record. So it was the first one we made, and I think it was maybe the third one that came out or something. But
yeah, it was the third one that came out, which I do think was a blessing, because it was kind of a cool start to be like, well, you've been working on this. This is, all of your effort and time that you've dedicated and all of this like industry shenanigans to try to like get established. And we just had to like let it go. And I think that was a really good lesson that we have taken with us into the studio in the years since. Like it was like, great, forget it. Let's just start from scratch. We had to pretend that those songs didn't exist. Who cares? we did all that work, doesn't matter, forget about it, start over. And I'm so happy that Old World was our first record. I think that was cool, and that gave depth to that first album.
No, absolutely. Because I mean, both of them, if you look at them sort of individually, they can both be totally different debuts depending on how you want to sort of appreciate the record and experience it. But I also feel like for you guys, like, how does that sort of affect things from a creative standpoint? Because I'm assuming having a bit of a stumble in momentum like that, for lack of a better word, can be a little bit difficult. Like, you've got a record that's like, oh, hey, this is going to be a solid debut. Then suddenly record, bullshit, for lack of a better word. It all comes around, and then you're like, okay, well, now we've got a different debut. Like, does that sort of, I guess, hamper this formative momentum, or are you just sort of like, well, let's just take it as it comes. Like, let's be humble about how it's all going to happen.
I think it just made us like better. I think it just made us have a little more like grit. It's just hard. Like it's supposed to be hard, and it was. And then, interestingly, I was speaking about this on another interview today, but like, we thought it was really weird that we appreciated that Last Gang Fought, Grow Up and Blow Away, but we thought it was really weird that it then came out after Live It Out. So we put out Old World Underground, and then we made this like pretty heavy rock record, Live It Out. And then suddenly we were just like, this is so random, like bedroom electronica album. This is so confusing. But when you zoom out and think about that Fantasies was coming next, it actually kind of showed like a softer side. You could have dismissed us from Live It Out as like, okay, these guys are really like leaning hard into this like aggressive guitar sound, which we really were we developed that sound to protect ourselves from things being thrown at us. It was for our own safety, but it's kind of cool now. I think like you're like, oh, I thought they were this, but then it's like, oh, this is the origin. Like it was kind of, if you would think of it cinematically in a movie, be kind of a cool moment for a flashback to be like, you get the first two albums, and then it's like, oh, here are these kids who like met in their 20s and embarked on this vision, and we're doing all these home recordings, which again was also like very new, like that. The technology was very new. It was like, whoa, you can, didn't used to be that like regular people could record their songs. It was like, we're listening to Portishead and Massive Attack and being like, what is happening? This is so incredible. This music that isn't sounding like cookie cutter out of a recording studio, which we now know. It's funny because I think we like in the like heyday of the early internet and like the excitement of like, it's all going to be so great. It felt, like because Portishead and Massive Attack were so good, I think it was like, yay, like everything's going to be like this now and like not cookie cutter. And then it's obviously that didn't happen.
The cookies comes in waves.
Yeah. But those records just like so good and so exciting to hear, like the way Beth Gibbons sang, where she's just like, you can hear her thinking. It was like, this is allowed, like, so thrilling for me as an influence, those records. And Massive Attack, like listening to Teardrop and being like, that's what, like, what is that? That's what we want to do. And so I do think it worked out that our sort of, like tender electronica experimentations came out in between Live It Out and Fantasies. I think it gave people a sense of another side of us.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense actually, and yeah, as you said, if you zoom out, it all sort of like it all sort of flows together quite nicely. But I mean, you did mention Fantasies there, because I was trying to think only recently how I first discovered Metric, and for the life of me, I can't remember how it was, but I'm certain it would have been around the release of Fantasies. I mean, hell, Gimme Sympathy is still required listening in this household on a regular basis. But
Great.
I really feel like it's Fantasies and then Synthetica a couple of years later that really breaks you guys into, again, for lack of a better word, which is a phrase I'm leaning on a lot this morning, into the indie mainstream. Like, how did that sort of, I guess, feel for you guys? Because obviously, you've been at it for what, 12, 13 years or so by that point. Like, to suddenly have this sort of level of minor success, how does that sort of like feel for you at the time? Like, obviously it would be like, hey, this is pretty nice, people are listening. But is it also just sort of like, well, we spent a long time getting to this point. This is just, it's a little bit deserved. It's hard work paying off. What's the internal vibe, I guess?
It was cool. Well, it was Triple J. I think in Australia, it was one of the first stations to play Help 'Em Alive. And that
probably
was
how I discovered it, actually, to be honest.
Yeah, got things going. But yeah, I mean, I think everyone had sort of written us off. Like we'd done Old World and Live It Out, and the touring was so endless. And we were very much in the like indie sleaze, like heavy music, like well, Billy Talent in Canada, but like DFA in we were touring in the UK a lot with like heavier bands and just it was pretty intense. And what right before we after we finished touring Live It Out, we were like, we need a break. I made a solo album. And I think that the sense was like, it's not really clear that this would continue. And then the fact that it did, like, 4 years later, we put out Fantasies, which seems like at the time it seemed like an eternity, but now I'm like, that checks out. Like, that doesn't seem like that long. But I think it was just like, it didn't feel like, whoa, this is so crazy. It just felt like, great, this is correct.
There was a lot of the bands that we were touring with in those years, like 2003, 4, 5, in those early days, and again, especially in the UK, it's like there's a mentality in that part of the world more so than over here, where it would make sense that you would be in a band, and then it would make sense that you end being in a band. It's not something that you like many people do as an adult. It's like you do it when you're a kid, and even if it's successful, it's like you do it, you tour, you play Glastonbury, you do the thing, and then you do the reasonable thing where you break up the band and you go have a normal life. And I think that was in the cards for us, to be honest, in 2006 and 7, where it was like, great, we did it. We did the thing. And we did the incredibly naive, childlike vision of being in a rock band. And you do it. And then we did it. And then we toured the world and we got tired and, developed some bad habits. And then you kind of call it quits. And that's kind of when we decided not to call it quits. So the fact that 2 years later, it's funny, we did an interview this morning where we were sort of looking at these like career highlights, and someone was showing us video footage of us like winning a Juno, which is like the Canadian Grammy, for Fantasies. And it was kind of like, oh, well, then that was the beginning of the next phase. It was like we decided to like triple down and actually do this with like our adult lives, not just our sort of, our 20s lives. And at that moment, we realized it might work. And we've had that career ever since. And it was relieving to know that it worked, because, we were making Fantasies on fumes and other people's money. And we were saying no to all the labels. And, we turned down deals with Warner and Interscope and all the majors and the things. And we went at it from a staunchly independent and really, sort of high moral place. And it could have easily not worked. And it worked. And here we are talking to you 25 years later.
Well, I'm glad it all ends up at this point where we're chatting. But no, I am actually very glad of the fact that you guys didn't do the responsible thing and grow up and put music in the past, because
Yeah,
I
me
mean,
too.
yeah, because I mean, over the years, like you guys have never stopped writing and recording, really, so much to the point that in April we received the new album, Romanticize The Dive. Hello everyone, just dropping in very quickly to say yes, I am well aware of the fact that I accidentally called it Romanticize The Dive. My notes said dive, however, I was not looking at the screen and I thought I'd go by memory. Anyway, let's get right back to it, and let's thank Emily and Jimmy for not calling me out on my pure idiocy. Drive, and that feels like a real sort of like laborious journalistic way to go into that topic, but it is a wonderful piece of work, and it's one that feels like a little bit of I don't want to say a return to form, because it makes it sound like you'd gone off track a bit, but it's definitely a little bit of a thematic and sonic return to what you guys have done a little bit in the past. So I guess internally, was that a conscious choice, or was that something that just sort of happened along the way?
It was very conscious. It was when we sat down and started having conversations a few years ago about making this record that is our 10th record, including Grow Up and Blow Away. We sort of sat down and thought, let's try to have an idea of what we want this one to be before we just kind of go into it. The two records before that, Formentera 1 and 2, we're very much sort of like, well, we have no idea if we're ever going to tour again. We have no idea if the world's ever going to be the same again. And so let's just make the music from the outer edges of our imagination, And so sort of like music with a plan, but music with a plan to have no plan. And that's extremely freeing and awesome. And loved it. But this time around, we thought we should have an idea of what we want to do going into this. And we both sort of were really drawn towards the idea of of a return to form, of a return to um, to the Fantasies and Synthetica era for us, and putting together the teams that made those records, and which is exactly what we did. We hired Gavin Brown and Liam O'Neill and Sean O'Mahony, and we went to Electric Lady and worked in New York, and tried to sort of mimic the process of what we did on those two albums. And a lot of the times when we were sort of looking for musical answers, instead of looking externally, we looked to that era of our own music and looked to ourselves for answers and inspiration. And I think that's sort of why you get that sense that it is that sort of like, not necessarily, yeah, it's not like a return to anything, but it's a definite acknowledgement of the history that it came from.
Yeah, that makes sense. Especially like as I said, listening through it, it's that sort of thing where I'm listening to it and I'm feeling this feels like classic Metric, even though to me the band have never sort of like really gone too far away from that sound. It's just been a constant evolution, but it's like it feels nice. Is the best way of putting it. It's the best way I can sort of describe the record. It feels nice.
That's great. That's great.
But I guess one question I always love to ask folks who do release a new record, and I guess this is a very fitting question considering that there was a conscious decision to sort of have this bit of a sonic, again, return to form. What does an album like this say about who Metric are in 2026? If that's not too much of a journalist question.
Very
I don't
true.
know, Em. What?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the title, I mean, Romanticize the Dive is like, I think tells you in probably one of the clearest examples of just like really, leading the horse to water. It's like we're all the times, all the like early days and the struggles and the things that were like what you're kind of trying to escape. Well, when you look back, and for us, we're just like, how cool and how great to get to like have that experience of like playing to 10 people in the sweaty clubs, and like just to have the process. Because I talk to young artists now, it's just different. It's hard. Like you can't really ever be alone to figure out who you are, and the sort of like self-surveillance and the fact that everyone around you is also like, you're going to end up on somebody's Facebook page and your boss is going to be like, why are you crowd surfing? There's just, you can get past that stuff, but it's a state of mind, and it's a lot. I feel that there's been a real loss of freedom. And I think people like denigrate the like younger generations, and I think it's bullshit. I think there's like all these cool people who are just trying to get out from under the fact that they were born into a time when the technology is so dominant, and you had baby pictures on Facebook since you were a baby. So, I feel like our purpose is to be like, there is something here to romanticize. And it's not like, oh, like rose-colored glasses on the past. It's like, no, it was cool. And also in your neighborhoods and in your life, like your little mom and pop stores and your dive bars and those places that are kind of gritty and grungy, like don't be so quick to hope that they become condos, because it's just like, that's the whole world. And those places disappear, and we're all like having a less rich life for it. And at a time when we're getting our noses rubbed in like ultra wealth, and we're to the point that everybody just feels kind of like shit, because it's like, okay, well, we're not that rich, but we all have these really great lives and like incredible friendships and cool experiences. And like, this was life for everyone for a long time. And it's only, to me, I'm definitely trying to manifest something really positive here, like a blip where the whole world was forced to like have their noses rubbed in like other people's like decadence and greed and arrogance, and like in the case of certain administrations, cruelty. So just being like, where you're at is cool, you're cool, your friends are cool, and your little local spots are also cool. There couldn't be a more clear statement of like what Metric has been about from the beginning is all kind of in there.
It's absolutely stunning. I truly love that wrap up of it there. Actually, it's
That was a great answer. I got to say,
it really
that
was. Thank
fantastic.
you.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys.
So obviously, as we speak, you guys have been busy in recent months and preparing again to resume. One of the best lineups of Canadian bands I've ever heard of, with Broken Social Scene and Stars. So I can imagine that must have felt very nice for you guys with this wonderfully communal lineup of bands. I mean, there's a lot of friends on the road with you in that case. But I would be remiss not to ask. It has been 13 years since you guys were last in Australia. Now, you sort of touched on like there's some hope of a return, but how realistic are we looking at how realistically are we looking towards a return for Metric? Should we be?
It's all on you, Tyler. Like,
oh, okay.
You.
Well, now I'm a little bit worried about the reach of this podcast.
Yeah, you are our entire campaign.
Right. I will do what I can.
All the feelings Australia would be amazing.
All the feelings Australia would be amazing. I mean, there's an unfortunate reality about touring in 2026, and I think that it's related to all of the other unfortunate things that exist in the modern world, which is just the unbelievable cost of everything, And it's real, but that doesn't. We're not the kind of people that just sort of fall to that and give up because something is going to be ridiculously expensive and very, very likely a massive money loser. We couldn't care less. So it's more of a matter of whether we can find out the perfect way to go and lose a bunch of money in Australia.
No, that is completely fair. Yes, I've definitely been hearing from
exactly.
I've been hearing from so many people about the realities of just the cost of touring. I mean, hell, I'm certain that's probably why we haven't seen Broken Social Scene in Australia in 16 years. Because imagine the cost of getting everyone on ground for that.
100%. And every time I look at the news and I'm like, oh, Strait of Hormuz, like here we go. I'm just like, there's our bus, diesel costs. Like everyone's budgets are just destroyed, by all of these other factors, and let alone just the reality of touring in itself is it's a hard test. And yet, as Jimmy said, we're always looking for an excuse to lose money.
Yeah, there's got to be more ways. We haven't explored all of them quite yet. So.
Well, I'm definitely hoping that you'll be able to absolutely hit rock bottom of the budget when you guys finally come back to Australia. But in the meantime, I should probably get down to the portion of the podcast from which its namesake is derived. So, as I always say, it's a very long explanation, but Trusty Chords sees me follow the 1-3-5 structure of standard chord. So I ask about one artist that's been impactful, 3 albums that have been influential, and 5 songs you can always turn to. Again, very sort of difficult question to just throw at you guys, but I'm determined to make this happen. So I guess I'll ask the question to each of you here, but I might start with you, Jimmy. I'd like to know, who is the one artist that has inspired you the most, whether it be personally or creatively?
Well, I mean, I can't say one artist did more than 1,000 others, but in terms of its relation to Metric, I was never really a huge Sonic Youth fan before I was in this band. I didn't actually really know them very well at all, but it was one of the major crossovers between Emily, Josh, and Jules was the love of Sonic Youth, and so I was sort of late to the game on that, and it definitely was one of the most influential things in terms of what I wanted to do in the band and how I wanted to play guitar and how I wanted the band to feel, not necessarily sound, but how I wanted it to feel, to be in it and to tour the world and to sort of like have a vision of what my life would be like. They were pretty massively influential for me.
I mean, even to this day, they are still inspiring new bands all the time, which is really, really heartening to know that so many young musicians are still looking towards them for inspiration. And Emily, what about yourself? Who would be one artist inspired you the most? And I should also say, honorable mentions are totally fine. If if you can't just pick one, I should say that.
That's great. Thanks for the leniency. I would say Carla Bley. She's a jazz composer that my dad worked with. He was a writer and wrote incredibly strange, esoteric poems that she put to incredibly strange, esoteric music. They did many projects together in the 1970s, but their most, monumental was something called Escalator Over the Hill, which it's kind of like a Sgt. Pepper's of jazz. Like the jazz world lost their minds because it was, like Jack Bruce from Cream and Linda Ronstadt and like Charlie Hayden and like all just early, incredible collaborative music that was set as sort of like an opera, based on my dad's, I cannot enforce this enough, very strange lyrics. But I grew up just being like, oh, this is what you do. Like, she started her own record label. They had this huge loft in New York where they just like made all their records. She sang, but mostly she did all the arrangements, which I'm in touch with some of the people that have played her compositions, through Hal Wilner, the late Hal Wilner, still works with a lot of those foreign players. And I can hear a Carla Bley arrangement from like across the room. I'll be like, oh, I hear that. So she wrote this whole thing. She composed this whole thing and sang and played it and just executed. And I was only later did I realize that this was this like stunningly exceptional person. I was just like, it's what you do, you know? And then realized like, oh, that's Carla Bley. So she was incredibly helpful, but also I think maybe set me back a little because I had to recalibrate pretty hard once I got into the real world.
That's understandable, and I'm actually very surprised that I never actually clicked through in the old Wikipedia page to actually realize that the Escalator of the Hill was Carla and your father. But here we are.
Yeah, well, don't worry about Wikipedia because it's wrong for my dad. It says he was like born in Montreal. I mean, it's completely wrong. It says there's books of things saying that he was a piano player. They've confused him with Paul Bley. He was born in Vassar, Michigan. It was like a poet athlete. Just so you know, so one person knows in Australia that he's not a piano player from Montreal.
Well, thank you very much. I'm after this, I'm going to go right to Wikipedia and start doing some editing for you.
If you please correct it, that would be great. Thank you.
But my next question here, I'd love to know 3 albums that have inspired you the most. This could be albums you're always throwing on or things integral to the musical evolution. And I guess, Jimmy, do you want to take this one?
I mean, I'll start. I'll start with a duo out of, I think they were from Austin, Texas, called Stars at the Lid, ambient duo. And they have a record called And Their Refinement of the Decline, which I think I've listened to more than any other album in the history of my life.
It's a stunning record, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. I mean, if I start traveling anywhere, it just goes on. If it's just like earphones in, album on, and it's just how I move through the world is to that record.
It's one of those records which, for me, if I'm ever doing any a lot of writing, then I need to throw that one on, and I just it's very helpful in that sense.
Yeah, it's like an amazing sort of cross space between classical music and electronic music, and like I don't really know what it is. I've never really heard anything quite like it.
And I guess what would your second record be there if you could think of one?
If you want to,
probably.
I can tell you mine.
Absolutely, by all means, feel free.
Because it's actually not dissimilar in the sort of difficulty in classifying it, which is the Talk record, Spirit of Eden. Just what I was saying about like, you're like, what genre is this? This is just like what everything should be, but nothing is. And totally timeless. And that's like something that I listen to when I'm in the woods a lot, because it just fits. Like, I find when I listen to records at my place that's, in the woods, it kind of calls bullshit. Like the trees kind of call bullshit on a lot of stuff. And Spirit of Eden is always like, yep, this one is making the cut. It's so brilliant. And I still don't really know what's going on. And I've listened to it 10,000 times.
Yeah.
I could definitely throw in Steely Dan's Gaucho as the third.
Nice.
It's hard to
maybe we're doing 5. Can we do 5 as a pair? I think
absolutely.
That's fair.
Absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
That is completely fine.
It's a stunning record. It's unbelievable. And it sounds like the end of civilization. It sounds like the decay of 2 men's relationships that symbolize everything.
Well, I can definitely say those are some very great choices, as I'm sure that you could probably see by my little Zoom picture there. I will never say no to Sonic Youth and Skid.
I did see that on your t-shirt. Yes.
I didn't see that.
Very great choices. Well, you're clearly talking to your people here, Jimmy. I guess lastly, I'd love to know the 5 songs that you guys could always turn to, whether it be for comfort, for excitement, anything at all. Your 5 trusty songs.
Well, I was going to say, Neil Young, it could be 5 songs by Neil Young. Like
easily.
Right. Like when you're kind of similar to what I was saying about like the trees call bullshit. Like when you have, and for me when I have like, any kind of illness or like real life problems with me or my family or anything. It's just, I find that frivolous music, like, it's just like, no. So, the band, Willie Nelson, Neil Young, these artists, any of their songs will like prevail, I find. So like, I really like the song, like, For the Turnstiles. I would say that's one of the ones that I've listened to like 10 million times. And I would also have to throw in David Berman and the Silver Jews. Like Snow is Falling in Manhattan. It's just like, I don't know that we're going to get much better than that.
Or Pet Politics. Come on.
Pet Politics, yeah.
I am so glad to hear someone actually mention Pet Politics, because that is probably my favorite Silver Jews song, and
it's so funny. I go where I'm led.
Yeah, it's just so underrepresented in the grander discussion of his discography. But thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah,
absolutely. We could throw in like a Dave Van Cowboy from Boards of Canada.
Oh God, yes,
definitely.
Some amazing stuff. That whole record, Campfire Head Phase, is just insane. And it was like, probably took me about 8 listens to realize that the entire record has guitar on it, and that's maybe why they called it Campfire. And
right,
it never really like dawned on me before, and it was like, right, there's guitar through this whole thing. And I think I didn't realize that was sort of one of the reasons that I was connecting to that record in particular. So
that's actually that's actually blowing my mind a little bit, because I mean, I can't tell you how many untold hours I've listened to Boards of Canada in my lifetime, and yeah, I don't think I've ever sort of realized that, as you mentioned.
Yeah, it's real subtle and kind of it's weird. It's a sneaker.
I would throw in also Elliott Smith. I mean, Between the Bars. Really anything on Or, but I love the album From a Basement on the Hill, from the end of, was released posthumously, but I just think it's so good, coast to coast, so good.
Amazing. These are some truly stunning choices, and I think we've managed to get to 1, 3, and 5 between us all. So that sounds amazing. So
well done.
Folks, this is where I need to say, Emily and Jimmy, thank you so very much for your time today. It's been wonderful. And also for being part of the Trusty Chords podcast as well. It's been great to have you.
It's an honor.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Amazing. Thank you so much, folks. And hopefully we'll see you in Australia sooner rather than later.
Yeah,
depending on how well this podcast translates to the world.
Yeah, your campaign, send us updates. I want to see graphs. I want to see stats.
Yeah, we're going to send you a budget pretty soon, and we'll just figure out the wire transfer information.
I'll let you know my hotel room preferences, and we'll just get this thing locked in.
Stunning. Well, and it better be a very, very low budget. So. Thank you for listening to Trusty Chords. If you listened to this episode and enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you were able to take a few moments to like, follow, share, and review this podcast on your preferred platform of choice. As always, there's no obligation to do so, but considering it helps the podcast reach, I am forever grateful if you do. As always, I'm over on Instagram and Facebook at Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. I've also got the blog on my website, which is tylerjenke.com. That's tylerjenke/Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. That's where you can find a list of all the songs chosen by my guests each week, along with a playlist of all the songs chosen thus far. You can also find a link to the Buy Me a Coffee platform, where you can throw me a few dollars to keep this podcast running if you feel so inclined. I also need to thank Emily and Jimmy for spending their time with me this week for the podcast, and to Joe from Joe Corbett Publicity for helping to organise the chat too. But once again, thank you kindly for listening, and I hope to see you all again next week as I continue to celebrate music and those that create it.